Okay, we're back from break. So, as we left off, we start to see that this king had a dream. But before we go there, let's just clarify one thing, all right? The way the Lord himself told Pilate that his kingdom was not of this world in John 18, verse 36, he basically, what's going on here in Babylon and what Daniel is saying and what his brothers are saying is the same thing we should be saying today. Now, we live in this world, of course. We live in Babylon, fundamentally. But God's kingdom, and not any nation, this or any other nation, is where we ultimately belong and where we will be at home. And if we confuse the two, okay, like was trying to be done here, he was taking these Jewish kids from the tribe of Judah, the king's sons, and re-indoctrinating them. Not that they were there to do anything bad, but it sounds a little like Hitler Youth to me, okay? Take that as it is. They were re-indoctrinating them into something that was foreign, pagan. And it wasn't that Nebuchadnezzar was a bad guy. He didn't know any better. What he had to go through to come to that realization, what we read earlier on, was pretty traumatic. We're going to find that out, all right? But notice that we don't belong there either. So if we confuse these two worlds, what happens is we begin to open up ourselves to confused loyalties and a compromised faith, and that's not where we need to be. We cannot do that, all right? We cannot do that. Especially now. There is a sense of urgency. And what the king said, the king watched his dream here develop, all right? And we're going to get through that because, again, his spirit was troubled, as it says. And what does that really mean? What did he do about it? He spoke to the Chaldeans, to the king of Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. So the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. But if you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation, you're going to get cut in pieces, all right? And your houses are going to be made a dunghill. In other words, he wanted them to do the impossible, or he was going to kill them. Now, he couldn't figure it out, so he brings all the wise guys in. I don't mean the wise guys. I mean the wise men, the astrologers, stuff like that, and all the great wisdom guys of the kingdom. All right? He says, but if you show me the dream and the interpretation, you're going to receive gifts and rewards of great honor. So bring it on. Show me. So they answered again. They said to him, the king, tell his servants the dream and we will show the interpretation. The king answered, said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time because you see the thing is gone from me. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. You have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation. But the Chaldeans answered before the king, there's not a man upon earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore, there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician or astrologer. In other words, this is way beyond our head. They had no idea. And he says, and it's a rare thing that the king requires, and there is none other that can show him. I mean, he's saying, this is a matter of the gods, whose dwelling is not with us, so we don't know. So the king got real angry, furious. In verse 12, he commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon, and the decree, that mandate, directives, orders, the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain. And then they all sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Interesting. The little king, who was a big king, had to become a bully over a dream that troubled his sleep. All right? He was like the Phantom of the Opera. You know, nighttime sharpens, heightens each sensation, darkens, wakens, that stirs the imagination. Nebuchadnezzar may be the mightiest of rulers, but he was reduced to a trembling insomniac by a dream. So he did what other kings would do at the time. He calls in the wise guys, the wise men. He says, you got to tell me, I'll give you a reward. But they can't answer him, okay? They don't know what the dream was. They don't know what it's about. They can't make up some interpretation that'll just please the king. That'll even be worse. He'll take their heads off anyway. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and it says, in verse 11, no one can show the king except the gods, which we just read, all right? So here we see what happens when insecurity and anger and power come together. If you don't think we're seeing that in our world today by some major world leaders, including our own, through incompetence, insecurity, anger, and power, should never be in the hands of people like that. But history is replete with stories of those who were. The decree went out to kill the wise men. No different than what Reinhold Niebuhr wrote about in The Destiny of Man, The Nature and Destiny of Man, about political tyranny, which always can be traced to a darkly conscious realization of the insecurity of man's own existence, the excesses and the atrocities of people in power may speak to the fact that in their deepest hearts, they're not really in control of anything at all. And we see that strange insecurity manifested in the world today. And I've always said it. Those who want to control everything wind up controlling nothing. And we see that here. King Nebuchadnezzar. All right? Now, this is no laughing matter, because as well as Daniel and his brothers were favored, they were included in this crowd here, in this gang of, trying to help the king manage the destiny, or, sail his own ship. But it's at this point that Daniel and his buddies find themselves right in the firing line, okay? Because having graduated essentially from the University of Babylon, what we read in chapter 1, now they're numbered among the king's advisors. So they're on the death list. This is what, is so inescapable, all right? So what is the dream? We find out. God reveals it. Daniel answers with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who was already gone out to kill all these other guys, the men of Babylon. He says to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? So Arioch made it known to Daniel. Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. He did what any other guy like Daniel would do. He said, well, nobody asked me. Let me get audience with the king. I'll tell him what it means. Daniel went in to the house, made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, that they would desire mercies of God of heaven concerning this secret. They prayed. And Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. He already assured the guy that he could interpret the dream. Then he went home and prayed about it with his brothers. Then, listen, then in verse 19, the secret was revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. And then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions, and they will prophesy. And here we have it. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and he sets up kings. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that show and know understanding. He reveals the dark, deep, secret things. He knows what's in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. Remember what we said. By the light, by the work of the light, those names, we are guests of the King, and God is gracious. The names of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, that Nebuchadnezzar and the rest of his Babylonian cronies had no clue what they were doing by changing these guys' names. All they did was amplify the glory of God. I thank thee and I praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. So now we come into the part where Daniel interprets the dream. Okay? Knowing that there's no speculation here, there's no magic, there's nothing. It's him and his concourse and his discourse with God. Daniel went into Arioch, verse 24, whom the king ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. And he went and said to him, Don't destroy these guys. Bring me before the king. I'll show him the interpretation of the dream. Just chill. We don't need to have heads flying. Arioch brought Daniel before the king in haste, because he knew he had to get this order done, or the king was going to say, "Why didn't you do what I told you to do?" All right. He said thus, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known the king the interpretation. Notice how now Arioch, these guys are all buddies, he doesn't say of our guys. He said of those that were captives of Judah. All of a sudden, he doesn't want to associate himself with these guys because the king might misinterpret that too. And again, off with his head. Okay? The answer the king said to Daniel, whose name was changed to Belteshazzar, he says, Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and the interpretation? Daniel answered, In the presence of the king, he said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers, they can't show you this. They don't know, but there is a God in heaven that reveals secrets and makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be and what will happen in the latter days. Thy dream and thy visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. In verse 29, he says, As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what would come to pass hereafter. And he that reveals secrets makes known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, the secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom, that I have more than any living, but for their own sakes. This is for you. This is for you to know, and the mightiest, to know the thoughts of thy heart is between you and God, he's saying, without saying it. Thou king, you saw and beheld a great image. The great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and the form thereof was terrible, or terrifying, okay? The image was a head, was of fine gold, breast and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, his feet part iron and part clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands. All right? It appeared. All right? And it smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay. In other words, the stone attacked that part of the image. Take the legs out, the rest falls. And it broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold were all broken in pieces together. And they became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, that no place was found for them. The wind just carried them away, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. And we will tell the interpretation, therefore, before the king. Thou, King, art King of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, and he gave you power and strength and glory. So now he's setting it up like, you didn't do this on your own, buddy. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven hath given unto thine hand. And he's made you ruler over all this stuff. God did this, all right? He said, but after thee shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours, and yet a third of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. All the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron breaks all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou saw the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou saw the iron mixed with the clay. In these days of the kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. So he's saying the kingdoms of men, the empires, and the classical interpretation is you have the Babylonian Empire, you have the Greek Empire, you have the Persian Empire, and you have the Roman Empire, okay? And they're correlated to these body parts. And in the physical sense, in that old covenant world, those kingdoms did exist and they did fall. But look where it says that he says the kingdom is going to be divided, which it currently is too, all right, in Israel and Judah and the tribes to this day. He said, but he's going to set up a kingdom that no one is going to be able to destroy. None. And he let the king know basically what was to come. So at this point, the king is relieved, all right? Relieved. And he fell on his face and he worshiped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and a sweet odor. The king answered to Daniel, of a truth, it is that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing that you could reveal this one. The king made Daniel a great man, gave him many gifts, and made him ruler over all the whole provinces of Babylon. He was the right-hand guy, the chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon itself. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Doesn't get any better than that. You're captive, all right? You're reprogrammed, reindoctrinated. Doesn't work. Everybody's going to die because the king has a bad dream. And then God gives the revelation to Daniel and sets these guys up in a foreign kingdom, one that they are not bought into. They work there, they live there, they're in captivity. They work directly for the king, and quite honestly, as what they were called, slaves that were converted, captives from a foreign government, a foreign king, a foreign land, and a foreign god. But now Nebuchadnezzar becomes accountable because he has seen the hand of God move. And the rewards for these four young lads who had already defied the first mandate to set the stage are in positions of tremendous power right in the kingdom, okay? Remember, God reveals the deep and hidden things. He knows what's in the darkness, and he knows the light, and the light dwells with him, okay? It's, now we're going to get to the point of the confidence with which Daniel sees and actually speaks not only to God, whom he believes obviously changes everything and does everything, but he's got Nebuchadnezzar seeing this then, because they had a polytheistic, nature gods, dwelling with the flesh, nonsense, all kinds of gods for all kinds of different things. And they gets introduced to the one true God and sees him in power, all right? Sees him in power. culture and what we believe is what we call Christianity, or true believers, let's say. We talked about that mixing and mingling and understanding, and and a great word out there today, and a misused word, is tolerance. Okay, they've decided to make everything politically incorrect. These are the ones that are asking for tolerance, accept what they want. It was that way back then too. The modern Western world thinks of religion, they think of the word tolerance. There was a guy named John Stott who pointed out that people do not always stop to define what they mean when they say tolerance. Now, so speaking specifically of that, let's just take a minute out. There are three kinds of tolerance. The first might be called legal, which ensures that every minority's religious and political rights are adequately protected by law. We're one of the only countries in the world that does that for now. It's changing. And that's the right thing. There's another kind of tolerance too. It encourages respect for all people, whatever views they may hold, and seek to understand and appreciate their position. And this too is a virtue which Christians wish to cultivate, all right? But there's a third one. There's a third one. And this is all relative, by the way. What about intellectual tolerance? That's the third one. This one would want to cultivate a mind that is so broad that it can tolerate every opinion without ever detecting anything in it that needs to be rejected. That's not a virtue. It's actually a vice of the feeble, according to John Stott, the feeble-minded. How many times I've told you that our country is becoming feeble-minded. You may not think so, you may not see it, but out of 330 million people, our median IQ is 98. That's just above moron. That's a technical term in the world of psychology and mental medicine, if you will. And this ability to see everything like, oh, everybody, what it does, it winds up degenerating into an unprincipled confusion of truth with error and goodness with evil. And what is it that we see every day today? Everybody says the world's upside down. Good is evil and evil is good, okay? That's a degeneration, an unprincipled confusion of truth with error. And any believer that believes that truth and goodness have been revealed in the Messiah cannot possibly come to terms with this kind of cultural stuff going on. It just doesn't work. So Nebuchadnezzar finally promotes Daniel. Things are moving in a different. And just when it was going the right way, chapter 3 starts. And Nebuchadnezzar, the king, makes an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits. 60 cubits. Cubit is 18 inches, so 60 cubits is 60 feet. That's 90 feet tall, okay? And the breadth was 6 cubits, all right, which is 9 feet wide. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then, good old King Nebi sends to gather together all the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the councils, all of his administration, okay? And all the rulers of the provinces, and to come to the dedication of the image of Nebuchadnezzar the king. Come on, look how great I am. Then he heralds and he says out loud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time when you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, that you will fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king set up. So there. Verse 5, chapter 3. And whoever, listen in verse 6 now, this is the king getting lost in himself, okay? And whoso falleth not down and worships shall the same hour be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Now that's those who do are the real problem. Because we find out later on in Revelation that those who do bow to the image and worship the image of the beast are cast into the real fire. All right? But that's later. So in verse 7, all right, and at that time when all the people heard this, and they heard the instruments, that everybody fell down and worshiped the image of Nebuchadnezzar like a bunch of knuckleheads. Well, they were afraid because this guy could just make a mandate and have your job, have your head, destroy your family, your home, everything. He's the king. Okay. Yeah, what happens? Daniel's friends, his brothers, all right, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, all right. And the Chaldeans came over and they accused these Jews. They said, hey, King Nebuchadnezzar, oh, King, live forever. You're the best. You're the greatest. Make a decree. We listen. But whoever doesn't fall down and worship, remember, you're supposed to kill them. So guess what? There are certain Jews. Now they're Jews. Now they're not preferred of the kingdom. Now they're just a couple of Jews. All right? And those that you set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, particularly Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor do they worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Because Daniel's friends trust God. But here Nebuchadnezzar goes in a rage and a fury in verse 13. And he commands that they be brought, these men, before the king. And then he speaks and he says to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image that I have set up? Now, if you're ready, that at what time you hear the sound of these instruments, you should fall down and worship. It'll be well with you. I'll make it well with you. But if you don't worship, you're going to be cast that same hour into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Oh, how quickly power corrupts. And absolute power absolutely corrupts. So this is what happens. They answered and they said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand too, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up under any circumstances. Whether he saves us out of this or not, we're not doing it. And guess what? They didn't. Full of fury, upset, he spokes and commands that they should be thrown and heat the furnace 7 times more than it was normally to be heated. He commanded the mightiest men in the army to bind them, the 3 of them, and throw them in the furnace. So they were bound. It's not they could do anything. And because the king's command was urgent and the furnace was exceedingly hot, they took the men and they threw them in to the furnace. And we're going to stop right about there until our next session, because we're going to find out what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and the resultant proclamation by King Nebuchadnezzar, who still is in the midst of learning lessons. And this isn't the last one that he's going to learn. But anyway, until then, until next week, listen, have a blessed Thanksgiving and be blessed. And may he who makes peace in high places make peace for you. Much love. Till next week.